On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, we look at China and the maritime supply chain. I am your host, Sal Mercogliano, chair of the Department of History, Criminal Justice, and Political Science at Campbell University in beautiful North Carolina, former merchant mariner, and an instructor in maritime industry policy, maritime industry security, and maritime history. So, two stories coming out day after Thanksgiving here about the role of China in the maritime supply chain. And the stories are really interesting because it gives us an indication of some issues looming on the horizon toward the supply chain, but just toward our normal handling of oceanic cargo. So let's take a look at the first story. So one of the first things to understand is the role that Asia plays, not just China, but Asia in general, in the global supply chain. They're essential on two elements. Number one, what most people don't realize, but is perfectly true, is that Asia imports more goods than it exports. If you look here at the percentages in total tonnage, red is discharge, basically how much they're shipping out. Blue is how much they're loading. And so the question is, okay, how much cargo are we talking about? How much cargo is being loaded? How much is being discharged? If you look in China, over 65% of cargo is being discharged in Asia. And that's largely bulk cargo. It's bulk cargo, it's oil, it's grain, it's minerals, it's ore, you name it. A lot of this goods are moving there. Plus, there's also a lot of components for assembly into finished products that are shipped there. And so the concept, again, that everything flows out of Asia, nothing goes in, is not completely true. Look at the Americas, it's inverse there. Obviously, we tend to load more goods than we discharge. Europe is about even, and then out in Oceania and Africa, very smaller percentages. But it's really important to have that context as we go forward here. So one of the first stories, and I put this on my Twitter page, and it's gotten a lot of views. So I want to put this on here because I think it's a really interesting story. And I've got a couple other stories that are kind of associated with it here. China is imposing quarantines of up to 7 weeks for cargo ships crew, and it's bad news for the supply chain. So one of the stories behind the scenes that's been going on regarding COVID is really twofold. One is the impact COVID has had on mariners. It's been detrimental, in particularly their ability to get on and off the vessels. They've been severely impacted by that. In the latest issue of the review of maritime transport, which I'm going to focus in on, there's an entire section here on COVID-19 and the Seafarers crisis. It is a devastating story that really has the potential to cause the global supply shipping to come to a screeching halt. Mariners are way over their appointed times on board the vessels. They're not able to rotate off, and it's caused a lot of problems down the road. There's also a great Center of Naval Analysis examination of this. I'll, of course, have both of these in the show notes so you can take a look at them, talking about COVID-19 and the safety of mariners adrift. But if you go to this story in Business Insider, and there's a similar story that I'll link to also in G Captain, which is this one right here, which is actually a Bloomberg story. Both these stories hit on a couple of key points. And let me go to the Business Insider here. So Business Insider always has these kind of quick little blurbs here. China is imposing mandatory quarantines of up to 7 weeks for returning Chinese seafarers. So this is on Chinese seafarers. You're talking about 56 days potentially being quarantined. Crew changes are getting more difficult due to stricter government requirements, says the Global Maritime Forum. Since so much trade takes place through China, a lot of crew changes take place in China. And now China is putting restrictions on there. Ships are rerouted to work around China's restrictions, prolonging shipments. It used to be you pull in the port, you do your crew changes. And understand, crews don't rotate out entirely. You don't take an entire crew off. You're continually cycling members on and off the crew. And what makes this story really interesting is this part right here. Now, the expert hub is imposing mandatory quarantines of up to 7 weeks, around 49 days, for Chinese seafarers returning from overseas, Bloomberg reported. These take place in designated facilities and are typically paid for by the employers, according to information posted by the Chinese shipping websites. The country has also banned crew changes for foreign seafarers, the media outlet reported. Even ships that had their crews changed out elsewhere had to wait before they can enter Chinese ports. All right. So this is creating a big problem. If you cannot rotate your crews, or if your crews are going to be staggered and waiting for long periods of time, this is going to cause potential problems. And the reason for this is China is behind the scenes. This does not get reported enough, but China is trying to increase their share of the number of seafarers working afloat. There's this graph here in the Review of Maritime Transport that talks about this, the 5 largest seafaring supply countries in 2021. And if you look at all seafarers, both officers and ratings, officers are the engineers and deck officers, the ratings are the unlicensed. Number 1 is the Philippines. Philippines is always across the board the most predominant seafarers out there. Second, the Russian Federation. The Russians are the second group out there, and this is across the board on vessels. Third is Indonesia, but fourth is China, and China is increasing. China is rapidly increasing. And so one of the things you're seeing here is China is trying to get more of their mariners out there as crews. And by creating this problem in China, even though they're being very strict on their mariners, up to 7 weeks quarantine, by making it almost impossible for other countries to do it, you kind of de facto run over to, well, it's better to have a Chinese crew than not. For example, one of the things that China was doing for a long time, not allowing Indians, which are the 5th largest group, to even come into their country. And again, we've been working across the board on getting vaccinations for mariners to get them essential work status. But right here, you're seeing this element being played out. If you go over here to the G Captain story, China's COVID-0 policy towards seafarers escalates supply chain woes. And again, one of the things our supply chain crisis, you see right here, in attempts to keep the virus out, China continued to prohibit crew changes for foreign crew and recently imposed as much as 7-week mandatory quarantine for returning Chinese seafarers. Again, they've been doing this on foreign crews for a long time, and now we see this happening. And China handles breakouts by locking everything down. And again, this is going to potentially slow up 1.9 million seafarers, according to Review of Maritime Transport out there. And if you start slowing these down, these crew changes, it's going to have a major element. There's some quotes here for some key players here. China is a major issue, said Bjorn Hugord, Chief Executive Officer and Ship Manager of Anglo-European Uvian Group and Chairman of the Hong Kong Shipowners Association. They are doing a great job of keeping COVID at bay, but the cost of not letting seafarers even Chinese seafarers can't get back into China. And this is causing problems. It's causing delays. It's causing issues across the board. And again, we've seen this manifest itself by issues coming out of China. And again, this is only one element here that we're seeing this happen in. And again, this could have potential repercussions down the line. The second story that's of play here is this: port congestion eases in Asia while US battles import deluge. Now, we knew this to happen. We knew things were going to start to historically slow down. Usually once everything is afloat or loaded or at the ports for the Christmas holiday, things begin to slow down, particularly as you come up against the Chinese New Year, which this year is February 1st. And usually March is the slowest shipping month, in the shipping year. And so we're seeing this slowdown happen in China. And in an earlier video, I talked about the fact that there's 2 other issues at play here. One is power outages and power conservation in China, which is slowing production down. And then the second is inflation in the United States, maybe putting a tamper here on the demand of goods coming in. But what makes this even more difficult here is China has superimposed a new level of difficulty on this. This story right here, off the grid, Chinese data law adds to global shipping disruption. So ships in Chinese waters are disappearing from tracking systems following the introduction of a new data law in China, frustrating efforts to ease bottlenecks that are snarling the world economy, according to 3 shipping sources directly impacted. So China put in effect on November 1st, Chinese personal information protection law, which is again an element here that's trying to prohibit the export of data from China out into the internet and out into public knowledge, which again is extremely funny because China mills and mines data all the time from everywhere else. It's just they just don't want that data coming out. This statement right here from one of the guys at MarineTraffic: if this continues, there'll be a big impact in terms of global visibility, especially as we come into the busy Christmas period, with supply chains already facing huge problems all over the world. All of a sudden, we do not know when ships are leaving and from where, and we also don't have the full picture on port congestion where AIS offers us. AIA offers us. This is the AIS transponder here off the coast of China. And I know it's a very confusing picture, and I apologize. But the thing you're supposed to see here is the lack of names. And instead, what you see is SAT AIS. So let me clarify something here real quick. The AIS systems are not turned off the vessels. Matter of fact, they can't be turned off. They're not supposed to be turned off the vessels. Let's put it this way. These are for navigation purposes. If you're a vessel out even off the coast of China, you're still squawking your AIS. You can still query vessels within range of you to know what the vessels are. You have local AIS. But what usually happens with systems like MarineTraffic is they employ personnel ashore with these receivers that gather all the AIS data locally. They grab it out of the air and then uplink it through internet connections and fiber optic cables. And that's what provides you the visual. So when you look at, for example, off the coast of LA and Long Beach, and you see all the ships' names right there, there are receivers around that coast that grab that data and uplink it. What you're seeing here right now is just the data that's being uplinked from the satellites. And again, satellite is really expensive. You can pay to query this, and it's going to cost you a lot of money to do it. But you can query this information, but what you're not getting is the uplinks from China, hence all this SAT AIS data right here. And that's going to have an impact on our ability to see where ships are. Are they leaving port on schedule? You have to get into the individual ports and see. You can't just type in. I mean, MarineTraffic has the ability where you can just type in your ships and track them all the time and get alerts on your phone when ships sail and everything. Now you're not going to get that because the ships are no longer being tracked. Why all this is important is because China is emerging as one of the leading maritime nations. Again, we tend to forget this, but China was a leading maritime nation for most of history. Go back to the pre-Columbus days and the voyages of Zheng He into the Indian Ocean, and China was a maritime dominant player. And what we're seeing today is that happen. This is from the review of maritime transport. Again, I'm going to be doing a series on this specifically, but if you look at the top 25, let's zoom in here a little bit for you. Ship owning economies, you'll see right there, China is number three, just behind Japan and Greece. If you go a little further here and you look at some of this other elements right here, let's go look down here a little bit. Next chart. Here's ownership of the world fleet. Greece is the number one owner. China is the number two owner. And actually, if you add China and Hong Kong together, because the guise of Hong Kong being separate is pretty much gone right now, you get an ownership that's almost 16.5%. So just just about 1% off from where Greece is. So China has become the largest, the second largest owner of vessels in the world. And again, if you go through these graphs on here and you start looking at data, if you look at flags, so here's flags of registry, for example, Panama, Liberia, Marshall Islands, always the top three. You see them right there, double-digit percentage points of controlling the fleet. Hong Kong's at 9.6. China is at 5. Add that together, it gives you 14.6%. That makes China the second largest controller of flags of registry in the world. China, again, demonstrating this capability. Come over here by leading flags of registry by value. Again, you see the value here in millions of dollars. So this is basically billions right here. Panama, Marshall Islands, Liberia, Bahama. Here's Hong Kong at $70 billion. China at $50 billion. Again, put that together, $120 billion. That puts them in second place. And then when you look at new ship construction around the world, in terms of bulk carriers, oil tankers, you name it, China produces 40% of the world's ocean shippings. Korea's at 31, Japan's at 22. Those three nations are in a big shipbuilding war against each other. They're outdoing each other. China's heavily subsidizing. Korea is doing that too. Japan's working on these very unique build arrangements where they building yards own part of the ships. And you get past those three countries that combined have 93% of the shipbuilding in the world. Philippines has one, and then the rest of the world, the entire rest of the world, the other 189 countries around the world build 5% of the world's ships. And this is why China is playing such a major role in the maritime supply crisis and in the supply chain. And that's why we need to be aware of this story about keeping mariners from going ashore and crew changes has a huge impact. And then the fact of the blackout right now on AIS, which really is going to impact freight forwarders, NVOCs, non-vessel ocean common carriers, the ability to have transit visibility of your cargo is going to be a big issue. When are ships leaving Asia coming across for LA and Long Beach is going to be an issue, a difficult thing. It's going to raise costs, it's going to reduce visibility, and it can have an impact on our trade. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like it. Please hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos when they come out. Subscribe, of course, and leave a comment if you like. Share it across social media. And if you can, we appreciate support via our Patreon page. It allows us to get new equipment, and more importantly, it gives me the time to do these videos. So hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. And as we head into the holiday season, all the best to everybody who has subscribed to this channel and put us over 2 million views, an amazing feat that I never thought would happen. So until our next video, Sal, signing off.